Picture this. Right now, as you're listening to these words, there might be another version of you sitting in a slightly different room, perhaps wearing a blue shirt instead of the one you have on, making the choice to skip this video entirely. But here's the truly unsettling part. What if that other you in their parallel reality somehow seems to know you're here? What if across the quantum divide that separates infinite versions of reality, consciousness itself appears to create bridges we're only beginning to consider? Welcome to a journey through one of the most fascinating intersections of modern physics and the deepest mysteries of the mind. I'm here to guide you gently through ideas that might reshape how you think about yourself, your choices, and the very nature of awareness itself. Whether you're settling in for the evening or simply taking a quiet moment from your day, let these thoughts wash over you like ripples in a cosmic pond. Tonight, we're exploring a question that sounds like science fiction but emerges from the cutting edge of quantum mechanics and consciousness research. What if parallel universe versions of yourself might possess a form of awareness that transcends the boundaries we thought were absolute? What if the fabric of reality is far more interconnected than we ever imagined? The story begins in the strange world of quantum physics, where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed, where information travels instantaneously across impossible distances, and where the very act of measurement seems to collapse infinite possibilities into a single reality. But recently, some of the most innovative minds in science have begun asking whether consciousness itself might be part of understanding these mysteries. Let's start with something that might surprise you. In 1957, a young physicist named Hugh Everett proposed what seemed like an outrageous idea. He suggested that every time a quantum measurement occurs, the universe doesn't choose just one outcome. Instead, it branches into multiple realities, each containing a different result. This became known as the many worlds interpretation. And while it sounds like fantasy, it's become one of the leading explanations for quantum mechanics among serious scientists. Imagine you're standing at a crossroads, deciding whether to turn left or right. In our everyday understanding, you make a choice and follow one path. But according to Everett's interpretation, both paths are taken. The universe splits, creating one reality where you turn left and another where you turn right. Each version of you continues forward, completely unaware of the other's existence. Now, here's where things become deeply intriguing. Recent research in quantum consciousness has suggested that awareness itself might not be confined to a single branch of reality. Scientists studying the quantum properties of consciousness have proposed that the microscopic structures in our brain cells, called microtubules, appear to operate in ways that follow quantum mechanical principles. These tiny biological machines may be involved in quantum computations that give rise to consciousness itself. Dr. Roger Penrose, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, along with anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, has proposed that consciousness emerges from quantum processes within these microtubules. Their theory, known as orchestrated objective reduction, suggests that consciousness isn't simply an emergent property of complex neural networks, but rather could involve a fundamental feature of the universe, operating at the quantum level. But what does this mean for our understanding of parallel realities? Some interpretations suggest that if consciousness operates quantum mechanically, it might not be entirely bound by the same limitations that separate parallel universes. While matter and energy in different branches of reality cannot interact, consciousness, being quantum in nature, has been theorized to exist in a kind of superposition across multiple realities simultaneously. Think about those moments when you've had an inexplicable sense that you were meant to make a different choice, or when you felt an odd certainty about something you couldn't possibly know. Ancient cultures had names for these experiences. The Egyptians spoke of the Ka, a spiritual double that shared memories and feelings with its living counterpart. Norse mythology described the Varduga, a ghostly being that would arrive at destinations before the person it resembled, performing their actions in advance. These aren't just cultural curiosities. They might represent humanity's intuitive recognition of something modern physics is only beginning to understand: the possibility that awareness may feel as though it transcends the boundaries we perceive between different versions of reality. Take a moment to consider your own experience of consciousness. When you make a decision, do you sometimes feel the weight of paths not taken? Do you ever have dreams that feel more real than memories, or sudden insights that seem to come from nowhere? Some researchers suggest these experiences could be interpreted as echoes of interaction between different versions of your consciousness across parallel realities. This isn't mere speculation. In quantum mechanics, we already know that particles can exist in what's called quantum entanglement, where measuring one particle instantly affects another, regardless of the distance between them. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance, and while he was skeptical, experiments have repeatedly confirmed its reality. Now imagine if consciousness itself could be described as becoming entangled across parallel realities. If your awareness exists as a quantum field that spans multiple versions of yourself, then information, insights, and even a form of recognition might appear to flow between these different branches of reality. This could explain why some people report uncanny experiences of déjà vu, prophetic dreams, or sudden knowledge about events they couldn't possibly have witnessed. Dr. David Deutsch, a pioneering quantum physicist, has suggested that quantum computers might one day be able to model experiences from parallel realities during quantum computations. If our consciousness operates on similar quantum principles, we might already be experiencing this phenomenon in ways we don't fully recognize. Consider the nature of intuition. We often speak of gut feelings, sudden insights, or knowing something without understanding how we know it. Traditional psychology attributes this to subconscious pattern recognition, but what if intuition represents something more profound? What if it's your consciousness integrating information in ways that resemble accessing parallel versions of yourself who have already experienced similar situations? This idea gains support from research into mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing the same action. Neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran suggests these neurons might provide the biological basis for self-awareness, creating what he calls second-order representations of our own mental processes. But some theorists propose that mirror neurons could symbolically function across dimensional boundaries, allowing different versions of yourself to recognize and respond to each other's experiences. The implications extend far beyond individual awareness. If parallel versions of yourself can be thought of as influencing each other through quantum consciousness, it suggests that every choice you make ripples across multiple realities. The version of you who chose to listen to this video might be subtly influenced by the insights gained by versions who made different choices, creating a form of cross-dimensional learning and growth. This connects to Carl Jung's concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that suggest an underlying order to reality beyond simple cause and effect. Jung developed this idea in collaboration with physicist Wolfgang Pauli, who helped him understand how quantum mechanics might provide a scientific foundation for these experiences. Some modern interpretations suggest that synchronicities occur when information appears to align between parallel realities, creating patterns that seem meaningful because they reflect the interconnected nature of consciousness across multiple dimensions. Recent advances in quantum field theory provide additional support for these ideas. Some physicists now propose that consciousness may not be fully produced by the brain, but is rather a fundamental field of the universe, like electromagnetism or gravity. In this view, individual awareness emerges when this universal consciousness field interacts with the complex neural structures of living beings. But if consciousness is truly fundamental, it might theoretically exist independently of any single physical reality, allowing it to span multiple universes simultaneously. As you absorb these ideas, notice how they might resonate with your own experiences. Have you ever felt guided by an inner wisdom that seemed to come from outside yourself? Have you made decisions that later proved surprisingly wise, even though you couldn't explain your reasoning at the time? These experiences might represent your consciousness, drawing upon the accumulated wisdom of different potential versions of yourself. The extended Everett concept, a recent development in quantum consciousness theory, explicitly includes phenomena like superintuition and the ability to choose which version of reality to experience subjectively. This theory suggests that consciousness doesn't simply observe quantum measurements, but may actively participate in selecting which branch of reality becomes subjectively real for the observer. This doesn't mean you can consciously control which parallel reality you experience. Rather, it suggests that your deeper awareness, operating at quantum levels below conscious thought, might be continuously influenced by and influencing other versions of yourself. The choices you make, the insights you receive, and the path your life takes might all be shaped by this hidden dialogue between parallel aspects of your consciousness. Think about creativity and inspiration. Artists, writers, and inventors often describe their best ideas as coming from outside themselves, as if they were receiving rather than creating. The composer Johannes Brahms spoke of ideas flowing to him from a higher source. The mathematician Ramanujan claimed his theorems came to him in dreams from a Hindu goddess. What if these experiences represent consciousness drawing inspiration from parallel versions of themselves who explore different creative territories? This perspective offers a profound reframe of human potential and interconnection. If your awareness spans multiple realities, then every moment of growth, every lesson learned, every act of compassion or wisdom ripples across infinite versions of yourself. You're not just living one isolated life, but participating in a vast network of consciousness that transcends the boundaries of any single reality. Some quantum consciousness researchers suggest that meditation and contemplative practices might enhance this cross-dimensional awareness. By quieting the constant chatter of everyday thought and entering deeper states of consciousness, we might become more receptive to the subtle influences flowing from our parallel selves. This could explain why meditation often leads to unexpected insights, and why contemplative traditions across cultures have recognized the interconnected nature of all existence. The scientific investigation of these phenomena remains in its early stages. While we have solid evidence for quantum effects in biological systems and growing understanding of consciousness as a fundamental feature of reality, The idea of awareness spanning parallel universes remains speculative. However, the theoretical foundations are sound, and the implications are too profound to ignore. As we continue exploring this mystery, remember that science often begins with seemingly impossible ideas that challenge our basic assumptions about reality. Quantum mechanics itself once seemed absurd, with Einstein himself struggling to accept its implications. Yet it has become the foundation of modern technology and our deepest understanding of the universe. Perhaps most remarkably, this research suggests that you are far more than you might have imagined. You're not just a single consciousness isolated in one reality, but potentially a vast network of awareness spanning infinite possibilities. Every choice you make, every moment of growth, every act of love or compassion might be both influenced by and influencing countless other versions of yourself across the quantum multiverse. In our next segment, we'll explore how this cross-dimensional awareness might manifest in everyday life, examining the subtle signs that your parallel selves might be trying to communicate with you, and investigating what this means for understanding the true nature of identity, choice, and human potential. As you settle deeper into these ideas, pause for a moment and notice something remarkable. The very fact that you can contemplate parallel versions of yourself might itself be evidence of the phenomenon we're exploring. Your ability to imagine other possibilities, to feel the weight of choices unmade, to sense paths not taken, this capacity for what philosophers call counterfactual thinking might represent more than mere imagination. It could be your consciousness naturally recognizing its own distributed nature across multiple realities. Let's explore how this cross-dimensional awareness might manifest in the texture of everyday experience. Have you ever walked into a room and felt an immediate sense that something was different, even though nothing had visibly changed? Or found yourself humming a song that seemed to come from nowhere, only to discover later that it held perfect relevance to a situation you hadn't yet encountered? These subtle experiences, easily dismissed as coincidence, might represent the quiet communication between parallel versions of yourself. Consider the phenomenon of déjà vu, that eerie feeling of having lived through an exact moment before. Traditional neuroscience explains this as a processing delay in the brain where new experiences are mistakenly tagged as memories. But some interpretations of quantum consciousness suggest something far more intriguing. What if déjà vu represents a moment when the boundaries between parallel realities become temporarily thin, allowing you to briefly access the memories of another version of yourself who has already lived through this experience? Research into the quantum properties of memory itself supports this possibility. Recent studies have found that long-term memories might be stored not just in neural connections, but in quantum fields within brain tissue. These quantum memory structures could theoretically exist in superposition, holding multiple versions of events simultaneously, until the act of remembering collapses them into a single recalled experience. But what if this collapse doesn't always select memories from your own timeline? What if sometimes it draws upon experiences from parallel versions of yourself? This brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of parallel universe awareness, the question of identity itself. If multiple versions of you exist across different realities, which one is the real you? Some philosophers argue that this question misunderstands the nature of consciousness entirely. Perhaps there isn't one true self, but rather a distributed identity that spans multiple realities, each version contributing to a larger pattern of awareness that transcends any single timeline. Think about how you've changed throughout your life. The person you were 10 years ago might seem like almost a different individual with different interests, beliefs, and ways of understanding the world. Yet you recognize a continuous thread of identity connecting all these versions of yourself across time. Now imagine extending this same recognition across parallel realities. The version of you who chose differently at key moments might feel foreign in some ways, yet familiar in others. Like meeting a distant relative who shares your eyes but not your experiences. This perspective offers a profound reframe of regret and what-if thinking. Those moments when you wonder about paths not taken, when you feel the phantom weight of choices unmade, might not be exercises in futile nostalgia. They could be genuine recognitions of parallel selves, brief glimpses across dimensional boundaries that remind you of the vast scope of your distributed existence. Some quantum consciousness researchers propose that creative breakthroughs and sudden insights represent moments when information flows between parallel versions of yourself. The painter who suddenly knows exactly which colour to mix, the writer who discovers the perfect phrase, the scientist who grasps a complex solution, all might be accessing knowledge already developed by other versions of themselves in parallel realities where they explore different creative territories. This doesn't diminish the value of creativity or reduce it to mere copying across dimensions. Rather, it suggests that creativity itself might be a collaborative process, spanning multiple realities. Each version of yourself contributes unique perspectives and insights to a shared pool of consciousness, creating a kind of interdimensional think tank, where every possibility is explored and every insight is available to the whole. As you contemplate this idea, notice how it might shift your relationship with your own creative process. Have you ever had the experience of knowing something without knowing how you know it? Of finding yourself capable of skills you don't remember learning? These experiences might represent your consciousness, drawing upon the expertise developed by parallel versions of yourself. The musician in you might access techniques mastered by a version who chose to focus entirely on music. The problem solver in you might tap into solutions discovered by a version who approached challenges from completely different angles. This interconnected view of consciousness also offers new perspectives on learning and growth. Every book you read, every conversation you have, every experience that shapes your understanding might be simultaneously enriching countless other versions of yourself across parallel realities. When you learn something new, you're not just expanding your own knowledge, but contributing to the collective wisdom of your distributed consciousness. The implications extend beyond individual development to relationships and human connection. If consciousness spans multiple realities, then the people in your life might also exist as distributed beings across parallel universes. The deep sense of recognition you sometimes feel when meeting someone new, the inexplicable comfort or unease certain people evoke, might be interpreted as reflecting connections that exist across multiple dimensional boundaries. Some interpretations suggest that particularly strong emotional bonds, like those between family members or close friends, may feel like they create quantum entanglements that persist across parallel realities. This could explain phenomena like reported telepathic experiences between loved ones, the ability to sense when someone needs help, even across great distances, or the profound dreams that sometimes occur when someone close to you is in crisis. Research into quantum biology provides fascinating support for these ideas. Scientists have discovered quantum effects in photosynthesis, bird navigation, and even the human sense of smell. If biological systems can harness quantum phenomena for practical purposes, it's not unreasonable to consider that consciousness itself, being perhaps the most complex biological phenomenon we know, might also operate through quantum mechanisms that transcend classical limitations. The study of near-death experiences offers another intriguing window into consciousness beyond ordinary reality. People who undergo clinical death and return often report experiences that seem difficult to explain given their brain state during the episode. They describe detailed perceptions of their surroundings, reported encounters with deceased relatives, and life reviews that encompass far more information than could be processed in the brief time involved. Some researchers suggest these experiences might be interpreted as consciousness temporarily accessing parallel realities where different versions of these events played out. Of course, it's important to acknowledge that these remain speculative interpretations. While quantum effects in biological systems are well established, and consciousness clearly involves quantum processes at some level, the idea that awareness spans parallel realities remains unproven. The experiences we've discussed could have more conventional explanations, and the scientific community has not reached consensus on these interpretations. However, the theoretical foundations continue to strengthen. Advances in quantum field theory increasingly support models where consciousness is treated as a fundamental aspect of reality rather than an emergent property of complex systems. If consciousness is indeed fundamental, like gravity or electromagnetism, then it might operate according to principles we're only beginning to understand. As you absorb these ideas, take a moment to reflect on your own experience of awareness. Notice the sense of continuity that connects your present consciousness to memories from years past. Feel the way your awareness can feel, as though it extends beyond the physical boundaries of your brain, encompassing your environment, your relationships, your hopes and dreams. This expansiveness of consciousness, this sense of being more than just the thoughts in your head, might be your direct experience of the distributed nature of awareness across multiple realities. The practical implications of parallel universe awareness extend into how we understand decision-making itself. If versions of yourself in parallel realities are exploring different choices simultaneously, then your decision-making process might involve more than conscious deliberation. It could include a kind of intuitive integration with other versions of yourself, each offering insights based on their unique experiences and perspectives. This doesn't mean decisions are made for you by some external force. Rather, it suggests that your intuition, that inner sense of what feels right, might be informed by a vast network of parallel experiences. When you stand at a crossroads and one path simply feels more aligned despite rational arguments for the other, you might be accessing the collective wisdom of versions of yourself who have already explored both options. Consider how this might change your relationship with uncertainty and choice. Instead of seeing decisions as isolated events with permanent consequences, you might begin to understand them as part of an ongoing conversation between parallel aspects of yourself. Every choice becomes an exploration. Every path taken contributes to the collective understanding of your distributed consciousness. This perspective also offers comfort in times of loss or missed opportunities. If consciousness truly spans parallel realities, then the relationships, experiences, and achievements that feel lost in this timeline might continue to exist and develop in others. The loved one who died too young might be imagined as living a full life in parallel realities. The career you never pursued might flourish in alternate versions of your existence. Nothing is ever truly lost. It simply exists in dimensions beyond your current perception. As we approach the heart of this exploration, it's worth considering what all of this might mean for the nature of identity and selfhood. If you exist as a distributed consciousness across infinite parallel realities, then what does it mean to be you? Are you the sum of all these parallel experiences? Or are you each individual version, or something else entirely? Some philosophers suggest that the question itself reveals our limited understanding of consciousness. Perhaps identity isn't a thing to be possessed, but a pattern to be recognized. Like a melody that can be played on different instruments, in various keys, yet remains fundamentally the same song, your consciousness might express itself through countless parallel lives while maintaining a recognizable pattern that transcends any single reality. This brings us to one of the most profound implications of parallel universe awareness. If consciousness truly spans multiple realities, then growth and learning in one dimension might accelerate development across all versions of yourself. The compassion you cultivate, the wisdom you gain, the love you express might ripple across parallel realities, enriching not just your own existence, but contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself. In our next segment, we'll delve deeper into how you might cultivate this cross-dimensional awareness in your daily life, exploring practices and perspectives that could enhance your connection to parallel versions of yourself. We'll also examine what this means for understanding the true purpose of human existence in a universe where every possibility is simultaneously real. As we venture deeper into this labyrinth of consciousness and parallel realities, let's explore how you might begin to recognize and perhaps even cultivate these subtle connections to your alternate selves. This isn't about developing supernatural abilities or transcending the laws of physics. Rather, it's about becoming more attuned to the natural quantum processes that may already be occurring within your awareness, moment by moment, breath by breath. The practice begins with something beautifully simple: paying attention. In our everyday lives, we're often so focused on the destination that we miss the journey itself. But consciousness, especially quantum consciousness, operates in the spaces between thoughts, in the pauses between breaths, in those fleeting moments when the mind becomes still enough to notice what's always been there. Consider starting with what contemplatives have called mindful awareness. As you go through your day, begin to notice the subtle currents of knowing that flow beneath conscious thought. That moment when you reach for your phone just before it rings. The inexplicable urge to take a different route home that later proves fortuitous. The sudden insight that arrives fully formed, as if downloaded from somewhere beyond your usual thinking process. These experiences, while they could certainly have conventional explanations, might also represent what some researchers describe as quantum intuition. If consciousness truly operates through quantum processes, then it would naturally be sensitive to information patterns that exist in superposition, drawing upon possibilities that haven't yet collapsed into definite experiences. Dr. Amit Goswami, a quantum physicist who has spent decades exploring consciousness, suggests that intuitive insights often arrive through what he calls quantum leaps of creativity. In his interpretation, consciousness doesn't gradually build up to new understanding through logical steps, but rather quantum jumps between different states of knowing. If parallel versions of yourself are exploring different possibilities simultaneously, these quantum leaps might represent moments when your consciousness briefly accesses insights already developed by your alternate selves. But let's ground this in your lived experience. Think about the last time you had what felt like a genuine breakthrough, a moment when understanding suddenly crystallized in a way that surprised you. Notice how these insights often arrive not through forced thinking, but through relaxation, through stepping back, through creating space for something unexpected to emerge. This quality of receptive awareness might be precisely what allows consciousness to access information from parallel realities. As you contemplate this, take a gentle breath and let yourself sink a little deeper into the present moment. Feel the weight of your body, the rhythm of your breathing, the subtle aliveness that pervades every cell. This embodied awareness, this sense of being fully present, might actually enhance your sensitivity to cross-dimensional influences. When you're deeply grounded in the here and now, paradoxically, you might become more open to information flowing from the there and then of parallel realities. Some interpretations of quantum consciousness suggest that meditation and contemplative practices naturally strengthen these connections, not because they create something new, but because they remove the mental noise that obscures what's already present. In the stillness of a deep meditation, when the constant commentary of everyday thinking settles, consciousness might naturally expand beyond the boundaries of a single reality. Ancient contemplative traditions seem to have intuited this possibility long before quantum mechanics existed. Tibetan Buddhism speaks of Rigpa, the natural awareness that underlies all experience. Hindu philosophy describes pure consciousness as the unchanging witness that observes all changing phenomena. These traditions consistently point toward a dimension of awareness that transcends the ordinary boundaries of self and other, time and space. And what's remarkable is how closely these descriptions align with some interpretations of quantum consciousness. If awareness is indeed a fundamental field that spans multiple realities, then contemplative practices might be sophisticated technologies for accessing and navigating this expanded state of being. But you don't need to become a meditation master to begin exploring these possibilities. Start simply by creating small moments of receptive stillness throughout your day. Before making important decisions, pause and notice if any subtle sense of direction arises from below the level of rational analysis. Pay attention to dreams, especially those that feel unusually vivid or meaningful. Notice synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that seem too perfectly timed to be random. Carl Jung, who coined the term synchronicity, believed these experiences revealed an underlying order to reality that connected inner psychological states with outer events. He developed this idea through conversations with Wolfgang Pauli, one of the founders of quantum mechanics. Together, they explored how quantum non-locality, the instantaneous connection between entangled particles, might provide a scientific foundation for synchronicity. Some modern interpretations suggest that synchronicities occur when information appears to align between parallel realities, creating patterns that seem meaningful because they reflect the interconnected nature of consciousness across multiple dimensions. That perfect book that falls off the shelf just when you need to read it, the chance encounter that opens unexpected doors, the song on the radio that speaks directly to your situation. These might represent moments when the boundary between realities becomes permeable. As you notice these experiences, remember that we're exploring possibilities, not proven facts. The scientific understanding of consciousness remains incomplete, and the idea that awareness spans parallel universes, while theoretically intriguing, lacks definitive empirical support. What we're cultivating is a kind of open curiosity, a willingness to notice patterns that might reveal deeper truths about the nature of consciousness and reality. This brings us to one of the most practical implications of parallel universe awareness, how it might transform your relationship with choice and possibility. If versions of yourself are simultaneously exploring different paths, then every decision becomes less about finding the one right answer and more about contributing to a vast experiment in consciousness and experience. Imagine approaching major life choices from this perspective. Instead of the pressure to make the perfect decision, you might feel curiosity about what this particular version of yourself is meant to explore. The career path you don't choose isn't lost forever. It's being investigated by another version of you in a parallel reality. The relationship that doesn't work out in this timeline might flourish in another dimension, contributing its own insights to your distributed consciousness. This doesn't mean choices don't matter. If anything, it suggests they matter even more, because each decision ripples across multiple realities, influencing not just your own development, but contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself. Every act of kindness, every moment of growth, every choice made from love rather than fear might strengthen the pattern of wisdom and compassion across all versions of yourself. Some interpretations of quantum consciousness propose that particularly coherent states of awareness, like those cultivated through spiritual practice or creative flow, can enhance communication between parallel selves. Musicians often describe entering a state where they feel like they're channeling music rather than creating it. Writers speak of characters who seem to write themselves. Scientists describe breakthrough insights that arrive as complete revelations rather than gradual discoveries. These experiences might represent moments when consciousness becomes coherent enough to access information from parallel realities where those same individuals have already explored similar creative territories. The songwriter might be accessing melodies already composed by alternate versions of themselves. The scientist might be drawing upon discoveries already made by parallel selves who approach the same problems from different angles. If you enjoy drifting through these explorations without interruption, members get every episode 48 hours early, completely ad-free. You can join them whenever you feel ready. This perspective offers a profound reframe of human potential and limitation. If consciousness truly spans multiple realities, then the apparent constraints of any single lifetime become less significant. The talents you don't have time to develop, the places you never get to visit, the relationships that don't work out in this timeline, all of these possibilities might be fully realized by other versions of yourself across the quantum multiverse. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of parallel universe awareness lies in how it might change your understanding of suffering and healing. Traditional approaches to trauma and emotional wounds often focus on processing experiences that occurred in this single timeline. But if consciousness spans multiple realities, then healing might involve accessing the strength and wisdom developed by versions of yourself who found different ways through similar challenges. Some therapeutic approaches already seem to intuitively tap into this possibility. Techniques like parts work in psychology recognize that we contain multiple aspects or subpersonalities within our psyche. What if these parts aren't just metaphorical constructs, but actual connections to parallel versions of ourselves? The inner wise woman, the playful child, the courageous warrior that emerge in therapeutic work might represent genuine connections to alternate selves who embody these qualities more fully. This doesn't minimize the reality of suffering in this dimension, or suggest that healing is simply a matter of accessing parallel resources. Rather, it proposes that consciousness itself might be far more resilient and resourceful than we typically recognize. Every version of yourself that has found a way through difficulty, that has discovered strength in the face of challenge, that has learned to love despite loss, contributes to a reservoir of wisdom and healing that spans all realities. As you sit with these ideas, notice how they might shift your sense of identity and possibility. You are not just the sum of your experiences in this single timeline, but potentially a vast network of consciousness exploring every conceivable variation of existence. The limitations you perceive, the regrets you carry, the dreams that seem impossible, all of these take on new meaning when viewed from the perspective of distributed consciousness across infinite realities. The research into quantum biology continues to reveal how living systems harness quantum effects for practical purposes. Photosynthesis uses quantum coherence to transfer energy with remarkable efficiency. Birds navigate using quantum entanglement in specialized proteins in their eyes. Even the human sense of smell might operate through quantum tunneling effects that allow us to distinguish between molecules with identical structures but different quantum properties. If biological systems can evolve to utilize quantum phenomena, it seems entirely plausible that consciousness, being perhaps the most complex biological phenomenon we know, might also operate through quantum mechanisms that transcend classical limitations. The question isn't whether quantum effects occur in consciousness, but rather how profound these effects might be and what they might reveal about the true nature of awareness itself. Some interpretations suggest that the evolution of consciousness itself might be a quantum process, with each moment of awareness contributing to the collapse of possibilities into actualities across multiple realities simultaneously. In this view, consciousness doesn't simply observe reality, but may actively participate in its creation, not through wishful thinking or positive visualization, but through the fundamental quantum processes that give rise to experience itself. This brings us to one of the deepest questions raised by parallel universe awareness. What is the purpose of individual existence if infinite versions of yourself are exploring every possibility? Some find this perspective diminishing, as if it reduces the significance of any single life to a mere drop in an infinite ocean. But consider the alternative interpretation, that every moment of consciousness, every choice made from wisdom rather than fear, every act of love and creativity contributes to the evolution of awareness itself across all realities. In this view, your individual existence isn't insignificant, but rather precious beyond measure. You are consciousness exploring itself through the unique lens of your particular combination of circumstances, relationships, and experiences. The insights you gain, the love you express, the growth you achieve, all of this enriches not just your own timeline, but potentially influences the development of consciousness across infinite parallel realities. As we move toward understanding how this might manifest in practical terms, consider how parallel universe awareness could transform your relationship with time itself. Linear time, the arrow that seems to move relentlessly from past through present toward future, might be just one way of organizing experience. If consciousness spans multiple realities, then past, present, and future might coexist in ways that allow for more fluid interaction between different temporal states. This could explain phenomena like reported precognition, those rare but documented instances where individuals seem to receive information about future events. Rather than violating causality, these experiences might represent consciousness temporarily accessing information from parallel realities where those events have already occurred, or from future states of the same timeline that exist in quantum superposition until actualized through the flow of experience. Dreams offer another window into this temporal fluidity. The strange logic of dream narratives where past, present, and future blend together, where deceased relatives appear as if still alive, where impossible scenarios unfold with perfect emotional coherence, might reflect the natural state of consciousness when freed from the constraints of linear time and single reality perception. Some dream researchers propose that the most vivid and memorable dreams might represent symbolic experiences of parallel realities where different versions of events are playing out. The dream where you reconcile with a lost love, where you pursue the career you never chose, where you heal relationships that remained broken in waking life. These might be glimpses into alternate timelines where those possibilities were actualized. As you reflect on your own dream experiences, notice which ones have stayed with you most vividly. Often, these are dreams that feel more real than memories, dreams that seem to convey important information or emotional resolution. Some interpretations suggest that these particularly impactful dreams might represent meaningful internal integrations between parallel versions of yourself, moments when the boundaries between realities become permeable enough for meaningful exchange to occur. The implications extend into how we understand creativity and innovation. Throughout history, breakthrough discoveries and artistic creations have often emerged through what seem like sudden revelations rather than gradual development. The periodic table came to Dmitri Mendeleev in a dream where he saw all the elements arranged in perfect order. Paul McCartney heard the melody for Yesterday, complete and fully formed upon waking. Nikola Tesla claimed to receive his inventions as complete visions that he could then examine and refine mentally before ever building physical prototypes. These experiences might be understood as moments where consciousness appears to access information from parallel realities where the same individuals have already made these discoveries through different pathways of exploration. The creative process becomes not just individual expression, but can be framed as a kind of interdimensional collaboration between multiple versions of the same consciousness, each contributing unique perspectives to shared pools of insight and innovation. This collaborative model of creativity might explain why multiple discoveries often occur simultaneously across different individuals and cultures. When the time is right for a particular insight or innovation to emerge, it might become accessible to consciousness across multiple realities, manifesting through whichever individuals or parallel selves are most prepared to receive and express it. As we approach the culmination of our exploration, take a moment to notice how these ideas might be settling in your awareness. Perhaps some concepts feel immediately resonant while others seem more foreign or challenging. This variation in response might itself be interpreted as reflecting the distributed nature of consciousness, with different aspects of your awareness recognizing truths that span multiple realities while others remain anchored in single timeline thinking. The beauty of parallel universe awareness lies not in proving its literal truth, but in how it expands our sense of what's possible. Whether or not consciousness actually spans multiple realities, thinking from this perspective can profoundly shift how you relate to choice, identity, creativity, and connection. It invites a kind of cosmic humility, recognizing that your individual perspective, however precious, is just one facet of an infinitely complex jewel of consciousness, exploring itself through countless forms and experiences. In our final segment, we'll explore what all of this might mean for the future of human consciousness and our understanding of what it truly means to be aware in a universe where every possibility might be simultaneously real. We'll examine how parallel universe awareness could transform not just individual lives, but the entire trajectory of conscious evolution itself, and consider what role you might play in this grand unfolding of awareness across infinite dimensions of reality. But before we venture into those cosmic implications, let's ground ourselves once more in the immediate reality of your present experience. Right now, as these words flow through your awareness, you are consciousness in action. You are the universe becoming aware of itself through the unique lens of your particular existence. And if the ideas we've explored hold symbolic or experiential truth, you are simultaneously all the versions of yourself that ever were or could be, unified in a vast network of awareness that transcends any single moment or reality. The question that remains is simple yet profound. How will you choose to live with this expanded understanding? How might recognizing your connection to infinite parallel selves change the choices you make, the love you express, and the consciousness you contribute to the grand experiment of existence itself? These are questions that have no final answers, only the ongoing exploration that is consciousness awakening to its own infinite nature across all possible worlds. As we delve deeper into what it might actually feel like to live with this awareness, let's explore the subtle art of recognizing when parallel versions of yourself might seem to offer guidance. This isn't about dramatic supernatural experiences or sudden mystical revelations. Instead, it's about developing sensitivity to the quiet undercurrents of consciousness that flow beneath the surface of everyday awareness. Imagine consciousness as a vast underground river system, with most of our daily experience taking place at the visible surface level. But occasionally, if you know where to look, you might notice the subtle bubbling up of deeper currents. These moments often arrive disguised as ordinary experiences, which is perhaps why they're so easily overlooked. Consider the phenomenon of what researchers call thin places, those moments when the boundary between different states of awareness seems to become permeable. You might notice this during the liminal time between sleeping and waking, when your mind hasn't yet fully committed to either state. In these twilight moments of consciousness, some people report experiences that feel like glimpses of alternate possibilities in their lives. Dr. Charles McCreery, a researcher at Oxford University who has studied spontaneous out-of-body experiences, notes that these often occur during states of consciousness that exist between ordinary waking and sleeping. While his research doesn't support the idea of literal travel between realities, it does suggest that consciousness can access information and perspectives that feel distinctly different from our usual waking state. Take a moment now to recall your own experiences of these in-between states. Perhaps you've had the sensation upon waking of continuing a conversation that began in a dream, or felt certain that you were in the middle of completing a task that you don't actually remember starting. Some interpretations of quantum consciousness suggest these experiences might represent brief moments when your awareness integrates memories or impressions from parallel versions of yourself. Of course, conventional neuroscience offers explanations for these phenomena in terms of memory consolidation, dream incorporation, and the complex processes by which consciousness emerges from sleep. But what's intriguing is how these experiences often carry a quality of meaning that seems to exceed their apparent content. They feel significant in a way that pure neural noise probably wouldn't. The texture of these experiences often involves what psychologists call noetic quality, a term borrowed from philosopher William James. Noetic experiences carry with them an inherent sense of knowing, a conviction that important information has been received even when that information can't be clearly articulated. If parallel versions of yourself were conceptually sharing insight across dimensional boundaries, this quality of wordless knowing might be exactly how such communication would manifest. As you move through your daily life, begin to notice moments that carry this noetic quality. The sudden certainty about which route to take home, even though you can't explain why. The inexplicable urge to call a friend just before they reach out to you. The creative solution that arrives fully formed while you're thinking about something else entirely. These experiences might represent your consciousness briefly accessing the accumulated wisdom of other potential versions of yourself who have already navigated similar situations. This brings us to one of the most practical applications of parallel universe awareness: enhanced decision-making through what some call multi-dimensional consultation. This isn't about receiving direct advice from alternate selves, but rather about cultivating sensitivity to the subtle patterns of knowing that might emerge when consciousness draws upon distributed sources of experience. Traditional decision-making often involves weighing pros and cons, gathering information, and making rational calculations about likely outcomes. But many of the most important choices in life require us to navigate uncertainty and complexity that exceed purely rational analysis. In these moments, we often find ourselves relying on intuition, that mysterious sense of what feels right despite incomplete information. Some interpretations of quantum consciousness suggest that intuitive decision-making might involve drawing insight from parallel realities where different choices have already been explored. The version of yourself that chose the risky career change might offer insights about entrepreneurial satisfaction. The version that prioritized family over ambition might contribute to understanding about the rhythms of domestic contentment. The version that moved to a different city might share knowledge about adaptation and new beginnings. This doesn't mean decisions are made for you by some external intelligence. Rather, it suggests that your intuitive sense of rightness might be informed by a vast network of parallel experiences. When you stand at a crossroads and one path simply feels more aligned, you might be accessing the collective wisdom of versions of yourself who have already walked both directions. But how do you distinguish between this kind of multidimensional guidance and ordinary wishful thinking or anxiety-driven projection? Some contemplative traditions offer practices that might help refine this discernment. The key seems to involve cultivating what Buddhist teacher Tara Brach calls radical acceptance, a state of open receptivity that doesn't grasp after particular outcomes, but remains available to whatever truth wants to emerge. In this state of receptive awareness, information that arrives from parallel consultation tends to have certain qualities. It often feels calm rather than urgent, expansive rather than constricted, and aligned with your deepest values rather than your surface desires. It carries what poet Rilke called rightness, that sense of resonance that occurs when something clicks into place at levels deeper than mental calculation. As you contemplate this, take a gentle breath and settle into present moment awareness. Notice the difference between the mental commentary that's constantly evaluating and judging, and the deeper stillness that simply observes without immediately categorizing. This quality of spacious awareness might be precisely what allows consciousness to access information from beyond the boundaries of a single timeline. Recent research in neuroscience provides fascinating insights into how the brain processes intuitive information. Dr. Antoine Béchara's work with patients who had damage to their emotional processing centers revealed that these individuals, while capable of rational analysis, consistently made poor decisions in complex social and financial situations. The research suggested that emotional wisdom, that gut-level sense of rightness, plays a crucial role in navigating uncertainty. Some interpretations extend this research to suggest that emotional knowing might be how consciousness accesses information that exists in quantum superposition, drawing upon possibilities that haven't yet collapsed into definite experiences. Your emotional response to a potential choice might reflect not just your personal history, but the collective emotional learning of multiple potential selves who have explored similar options. This perspective offers a profound reframe of emotional intelligence itself. Rather than seeing emotions as purely personal responses based on individual experience, we might begin to understand them as sophisticated information processing systems that can integrate insight from across multiple realities. The anxiety that warns you away from a seemingly attractive opportunity might be informed by versions of yourself who pursued that path and discovered hidden complications. The unexpected excitement about an uncertain venture might draw upon the joy experienced by parallel selves who took similar leaps of faith. But let's explore how this might manifest in the realm of relationships and human connection. If consciousness truly spans parallel realities, then the people in your life exist not just as single individuals, but as distributed beings exploring countless variations of relationship and interaction across multiple dimensions. This could explain the mysterious alchemy of human chemistry. Those moments when you meet someone and feel an immediate sense of recognition or familiarity that seems to exceed what could be explained by your brief interaction. Some interpretations suggest that this recognition might reflect connections that exist across multiple parallel realities, where different versions of yourself and this person have already explored various forms of relationship. The depth of feeling that can emerge between people sometimes seems to transcend what could be built through their actual shared history in this timeline. The friend who immediately understands your unspoken thoughts. The mentor whose guidance feels like remembering rather than learning. The romantic partner whose presence evokes a sense of coming home. These connections might be drawing upon relationships that have been developed across parallel realities. This doesn't diminish the importance of nurturing relationships in this dimension or suggest that connection is predetermined by multidimensional factors. Rather, it proposes that the foundation for human bonding might be far richer and more mysterious than we typically recognize. Each relationship might represent the convergence of multiple parallel explorations, bringing together the accumulated learning of countless interactions between different versions of the same souls. Consider how this might transform your approach to conflict and misunderstanding in relationships. If the person who triggers your frustration exists across multiple realities, then somewhere there might be versions of both of you who have already worked through these same issues and found resolution. Your anger toward them might coexist with parallel versions of yourself who have learned to see their behavior with compassion. Their resistance to your perspective might be balanced by alternate selves who have already embraced your viewpoint. This doesn't mean conflict is meaningless or that you should passively accept harmful behavior. Instead, it suggests that every difficult relationship might contain within it the seeds of healing and understanding, accessible through the patient cultivation of the kind of consciousness that can perceive beyond the immediate situation. Some therapeutic approaches already seem to intuitively tap into this possibility. Family constellation therapy, developed by Bert Hellinger, involves participants representing different family members in a spatial arrangement that somehow reveals hidden dynamics and pathways toward resolution. Participants often report receiving information and insights that feel like they come from beyond their personal knowledge, as if they're accessing some collective field of family wisdom. While this work is typically understood in terms of morphic fields or collective unconscious, some interpretations suggest it might represent a form of parallel universe consultation, where the representatives temporarily access the experiences of family members across multiple realities, drawing upon versions where different choices led to healing and wholeness. As you reflect on your own relationships, both current and past, notice which ones have carried this quality of recognition that seems to exceed the actual time you've spent together. Pay attention to moments when understanding arrives that feels like remembering rather than learning. These experiences might represent brief glimpses into the vast network of connection that exists between you and others across multiple dimensions of reality. The implications extend beyond personal relationships to collective human consciousness itself. If individuals exist as distributed beings across parallel realities, then human civilization might represent the convergence of countless parallel experiments in social organization, cultural development, and collective problem solving. This perspective offers hope during times when humanity seems trapped in cycles of conflict and destruction. Somewhere across the quantum multiverse, versions of our species might have already learned to live in harmony with each other and with the natural world. The wisdom developed in those realities might be available to consciousness in this dimension, accessible through the same kind of receptive awareness that allows individuals to access insights from their parallel selves. Recent research in what's called field consciousness suggests that human awareness might indeed operate through collective quantum fields that transcend individual boundaries. Studies of random number generators during major global events have shown statistical deviations that seem to correlate with moments of intense collective attention, leading some researchers to explore whether focused consciousness can influence quantum processes even at a distance. While these findings remain controversial and lack scientific consensus, they hint at the possibility that consciousness might operate through mechanisms that transcend classical limitations of space and time. If this is true, then periods of collective crisis might also represent opportunities for breakthrough insights to emerge from parallel realities where humanity has already found solutions to similar challenges. Consider how this might manifest in your own life as a member of the human community. Your individual growth in compassion and wisdom might contribute not just to your personal development, but to the elevation of consciousness across all realities. Every moment when you choose love over fear, understanding over judgment, cooperation over competition, might strengthen these patterns across the entire network of human consciousness, spanning multiple dimensions. This brings us to one of the most profound implications of parallel universe awareness: the possibility that consciousness evolution itself might be a quantum process occurring simultaneously across infinite realities. Each individual's journey toward greater awareness might contribute to the collective awakening of consciousness across all dimensions, creating what some theorists call cascade effects, where breakthroughs in one reality accelerate development in others. If you enjoy drifting through these explorations without interruption, members get every episode 48 hours early, completely ad-free. You can join them whenever you feel ready. But let's bring this cosmic perspective back to the intimate details of daily experience. How might awareness of your distributed existence across parallel realities transforms something as simple as your morning routine. As you brush your teeth, you might sense the presence of countless other versions of yourself engaged in their own variations of this same activity. The version who chose to live in a different city, using a different toothbrush in a different bathroom, but still participating in this fundamental ritual of self-care. There's something oddly comforting about this image. You're never truly alone, because across infinite realities, versions of yourself are navigating similar moments of mundane beauty. The quiet satisfaction of a task completed, the simple pleasure of fresh breath, the small act of caring for the body that houses your consciousness. All of these experiences are being simultaneously explored and appreciated by countless parallel selves. This perspective might naturally cultivate what contemplatives call ordinary enlightenment, the recognition that every moment, however seemingly insignificant, participates in the vast dance of consciousness, exploring itself through infinite forms and experiences. Your morning coffee becomes a cosmic ceremony. Your commute becomes a meditation on movement through space and time. Your work becomes your unique contribution to the grand experiment of consciousness, learning about itself through countless varieties of creative expression. As you move through these ordinary activities, begin to experiment with what might be called parallel presence. This involves maintaining awareness that while you're engaged in this specific version of experience, countless other versions of yourself are simultaneously exploring different variations, not in a way that diminishes your current experience, but in a way that enriches it with a sense of participation in something infinitely larger. This practice might naturally lead to what psychologists call self-compassion, but with a cosmic dimension. When you make mistakes or fall short of your ideals, you might remember that somewhere across the quantum multiverse, other versions of yourself have already learned the lessons you're currently struggling with. The wisdom they've gained through their explorations is part of your distributed consciousness, available to you through the same receptive awareness that allows access to any parallel insight. This doesn't encourage complacency or justify avoiding growth in this dimension. Rather, it suggests that your individual limitations are part of a larger pattern of exploration where every possible pathway of development is being simultaneously investigated. Your struggles in this reality contribute to the collective understanding of how consciousness learns and grows through challenge and difficulty. The healing implications of this perspective are particularly profound for those dealing with trauma, addiction, or other forms of psychological suffering. Traditional approaches to healing often focus on processing and integrating experiences that occurred in this single timeline. But if consciousness spans multiple realities, then healing might also involve accessing the resilience and wisdom developed by versions of yourself who found different ways through similar challenges. This doesn't minimize the reality of suffering or suggest that healing is simply a matter of accessing parallel resources. Pain in this dimension requires real attention, care, and often professional support. However, it does suggest that consciousness itself might be far more resilient and resourceful than we typically recognize. Some therapeutic modalities already seem to work with this possibility without necessarily naming it as such. Techniques that involve accessing inner wisdom figures or connecting with higher self aspects might represent symbolic ways of engaging with versions of yourself from parallel realities where you've already developed the qualities needed for healing and growth. The phenomenon of post-traumatic growth, where individuals emerge from difficult experiences with expanded capacity for joy, meaning, and connection, might be understood as consciousness successfully integrating wisdom from other potential versions of the self who navigated similar challenges and discovered unexpected gifts hidden within apparent tragedy. As you contemplate your own experiences of resilience and recovery, notice how healing often involves discovering resources within yourself that you didn't know existed, that inner strength that emerges during crisis, that capacity for forgiveness that surprises you, that creativity that flows when you thought you were empty. These might represent access to a broader reservoir of awareness that exists across all your parallel lives. This perspective also transforms our understanding of what it means to be authentic or true to yourself. If you exist as a distributed consciousness across infinite realities, then authenticity might not mean finding one fixed identity, but rather recognizing the vast range of possibilities that exist within your expanded being. The shy version of yourself and the bold version, the practical version and the creative version, the serious version and the playful version, all of these might be equally authentic expressions of your distributed consciousness. This doesn't lead to relativistic chaos where anything goes, because across all realities there seem to be deeper patterns that remain consistent. The core values that guide your choices, the love that motivates your relationships, the curiosity that drives your growth. These qualities appear to persist across parallel variations, suggesting that while the expression of consciousness varies, its essential nature remains recognizable. Some spiritual traditions have long recognized this paradox of unity and diversity within individual consciousness. Hindu philosophy speaks of the eternal self that remains unchanged while manifesting through countless temporary forms. Buddhist teaching describes the emptiness of fixed identity while acknowledging the conventional reality of personal experience. These ancient insights align remarkably with some modern interpretations of quantum consciousness spanning multiple realities. But let's explore how this understanding might influence your approach to goals and ambitions. Traditional achievement-oriented thinking often involves identifying specific outcomes and working systematically toward them. But if versions of yourself are simultaneously pursuing every possible variation of success and fulfillment, then your relationship with goals might naturally become more relaxed and experimental. This doesn't mean abandoning direction or purpose, but rather holding your ambitions more lightly, with the understanding that you're not responsible for actualizing every possible version of success. Somewhere across the multiverse, the version of yourself that became a famous artist is creating masterpieces. The version that built a successful business is enjoying entrepreneurial triumph. The version that chose family life is experiencing the deep satisfaction of nurturing relationships. Your task in this reality isn't to somehow achieve everything, but to explore with full presence and commitment whatever path feels most aligned in this particular dimension. The pressure to have it all or maximize your potential naturally diminishes when you recognize that all possibilities are being simultaneously investigated by different aspects of your distributed consciousness. This perspective might lead to what could be called relaxed excellence, where you pursue your chosen path with dedication and skill while remaining unattached to outcomes and untroubled by roads not taken. Every effort you make contributes to the collective learning of your parallel selves, just as their explorations inform the wisdom available to your current consciousness. As we approach the deeper implications of these ideas, take a moment to notice how your sense of identity might be shifting as you absorb these perspectives. Perhaps the boundaries of you are feeling more fluid, more expansive, less confined to the particular history and circumstances of this single timeline. This softening of rigid self-concept might be one of the most practical gifts of parallel universe awareness. The research into quantum consciousness continues to evolve, with new discoveries regularly emerging about the quantum properties of biological systems. Recent studies have found evidence of quantum effects in bird navigation, plant photosynthesis, and even human enzyme function. Each discovery strengthens the case that living systems have evolved to harness quantum phenomena for practical purposes. If consciousness represents the most complex biological phenomenon we know, it seems entirely plausible that awareness itself operates through quantum mechanisms that transcend classical limitations. The question isn't whether quantum effects influence consciousness, but rather how profound these influences might be and what they reveal about the true nature of awareness. Some researchers propose that consciousness might exist as what's called a quantum field, similar to electromagnetic or gravitational fields, but specifically related to the phenomenon of awareness itself. In this model, individual consciousness would emerge when this universal awareness field interacts with the complex neural structures of living beings, much like how individual radio signals emerge when electromagnetic waves interact with properly tuned receivers. If consciousness is indeed a fundamental field of the universe, then it might naturally exist in quantum superposition, theoretically encompassing multiple potential states simultaneously until the moment of observation or measurement gives rise to a specific experience. This could explain the fluid, unlimited quality of consciousness during deep meditation, dreams, or altered states, when the usual constraints of single timeline thinking temporarily dissolve. The implications for understanding the purpose and meaning of individual existence are staggering. If consciousness truly spans multiple realities, then your individual life represents consciousness exploring itself through one unique combination of circumstances, relationships, and choices. Every moment of awareness, every insight gained, every act of love or creativity contributes to the infinite self-discovery of consciousness across all possible dimensions. In this view, there are no insignificant lives or meaningless experiences. The quiet person who never achieves fame but cultivates deep inner peace contributes just as much to the evolution of consciousness as the public figure who influences millions. The individual who struggles with mental illness but develops extraordinary compassion for suffering contributes wisdom that enriches the entire network of awareness across all realities. Your consciousness, reading these words right now, participating in this exploration of possibility and mystery, is consciousness itself awakening to its own infinite nature. Every question you ask, every moment of wonder you feel, every expansion of understanding you experience contributes to the vast project of awareness coming to know itself more fully. As we near the culmination of our journey through these ideas, consider how this understanding might transform your relationship with time itself. Linear time, that relentless arrow pointing from past through present toward future, might be just one way consciousness organizes experience. If awareness truly spans multiple realities, then all moments might exist simultaneously in what physicists call the block universe, as a conceptual model accessible to consciousness under the right conditions. This could explain the phenomenon of precognitive dreams, where individuals receive information about future events that later prove accurate. Rather than violating causality, These experiences might represent consciousness temporarily accessing information from potential future states that already exist in quantum superposition, waiting to be actualized through the flow of experience. It might also illuminate the mystery of near-death experiences, where individuals report encounters with deceased relatives, life reviews that encompass vast amounts of information, and perceptions that seem impossible given their brain state during clinical death. Some interpretations suggest these experiences might involve consciousness temporarily accessing alternate experiential frameworks, where different versions of events played out, or future states where healing and understanding have already been achieved. But perhaps the most profound implication involves the evolution of consciousness itself. If awareness truly operates through quantum mechanisms that span multiple realities, then the growth of individual consciousness might contribute to the awakening of universal consciousness across all dimensions simultaneously. Every moment of expanded awareness, every breakthrough in understanding, every choice made from love rather than fear might accelerate the evolution of consciousness throughout the entire quantum multiverse. This suggests that your individual journey of growth and awakening isn't just personal development, but participation in the cosmic project of consciousness coming to know itself more fully. Every meditation you sit, every act of kindness you perform, every moment of presence you cultivate contributes to the awakening of awareness across infinite realities. In our final exploration, we'll discover how this understanding might transform not just individual existence, but the entire future of human consciousness, and examine what role you might play in the greatest adventure of all: consciousness awakening to its own infinite nature across every possible world. The future implications of parallel universe awareness extend far beyond individual transformation to encompass the entire trajectory of human consciousness evolution. If awareness truly operates through quantum mechanisms that span multiple realities, then humanity might be approaching a collective awakening that could fundamentally alter our species' relationship with existence itself. Consider the accelerating pace of discovery in consciousness research, quantum physics, and neuroscience. Each breakthrough brings us closer to understanding the true nature of awareness and its relationship to the fabric of reality. But if consciousness spans multiple realities, then these discoveries might not be isolated achievements of our particular timeline. They might represent the convergence of insights being simultaneously developed by parallel versions of humanity across countless dimensions. This convergence could create what theorists call phase transitions in collective consciousness, moments when accumulated understanding reaches a critical threshold that triggers rapid transformation across multiple realities simultaneously. Just as water suddenly becomes steam when it reaches the precise temperature for phase change, human consciousness might be approaching conditions where a new form of awareness becomes possible. Some researchers suggest we're already seeing early signs of this transformation in the increasing interest in contemplative practices, the growing recognition of interconnectedness across scientific disciplines, and the emerging understanding that consciousness might be fundamental rather than emergent. These shifts in perspective might represent the early stages of a species-wide awakening to the distributed nature of awareness. But what would such an awakening actually look like? Rather than dramatic supernatural abilities or transcendence of physical reality, it might manifest as a gradual expansion of empathy, understanding, and connection. as more individuals recognize their connection to parallel versions of themselves and others. The artificial boundaries that separate us might naturally begin to dissolve. Imagine a world where decision-making routinely involves consultation with the wisdom of parallel selves, where creativity flows from collaboration across dimensional boundaries, where healing draws upon the resilience developed by alternate versions who found different paths through suffering. Such a civilization might develop solutions to current challenges that seem impossible from our limited single timeline perspective. The implications for addressing global problems like climate change, inequality, and conflict are particularly intriguing. If consciousness can access information from parallel realities where humanity has already solved these challenges, then breakthrough solutions might emerge through the same kind of quantum insight that brings scientific discoveries and artistic creations. This doesn't suggest we should wait passively for multidimensional rescue, but rather that our own efforts might be enhanced by remaining open to insights from broader explorations of possibility. The environmental activist might draw upon strategies developed by versions of themselves in realities where conservation efforts succeeded beyond all expectations. The peacemaker might access wisdom from timelines where ancient conflicts found resolution through previously unimaginable approaches. As you contemplate your own role in this potential awakening, remember that consciousness evolution happens through individual transformation multiplied across countless lives. Every moment when you choose expansion over contraction, love over fear, understanding over judgment, contributes to the phase transition that might be approaching across all realities. The contemplative traditions have always recognized that individual awakening and collective transformation are inseparable processes. As the Tibetan saying goes, when one person awakens, the whole world moves closer to enlightenment. If consciousness truly spans multiple realities, then this ancient wisdom takes on new dimensions of meaning. Your personal practice of presence and awareness doesn't just benefit your own life, but contributes to the awakening of consciousness across infinite parallel selves and realities. Every meditation, every moment of mindful attention, every act of compassion ripples through the quantum field of awareness, strengthening these patterns across all dimensions. This understanding transforms spiritual practice from individual self-improvement to cosmic service. You're not just working on yourself, you're participating in the greatest adventure in the universe, consciousness awakening to its own infinite nature. Every insight you gain, every limitation you transcend, every moment of unconditional love you embody contributes to this vast project of awakening, spanning all possible worlds. But remember, this remains a theoretical and contemplative exploration based on interpretations of quantum mechanics and consciousness research that do not represent scientific consensus. The ideas we've journeyed through tonight represent possibilities rather than proven facts, invitations to expand your sense of what might be true rather than definitive answers about the nature of reality. What matters isn't whether parallel universe awareness is literally accurate, but how thinking from this perspective might transform your relationship with existence itself. Whether consciousness spans multiple realities or not, you are still a unique expression of the universe becoming aware of itself. You are still consciousness exploring its own infinite potential through the particular lens of your individual existence. As you drift towards sleep tonight, or continue with your day, carry with you this expanded sense of who you might be. Not just the person defined by this single timeline, but potentially a vast network of awareness, exploring every conceivable variation of existence. Every choice you make, every moment of growth you experience, every act of love you express might be simultaneously enriching countless versions of yourself across infinite realities. The mystery remains, as perhaps it should. The deepest questions about consciousness, reality, and existence might be precisely what keeps the universe interesting. Perhaps the questions themselves are more valuable than any final answers we might discover. And yet, as you sit with these possibilities, something profound might be stirring in your awareness. The very fact that you can contemplate infinite versions of yourself, that you can feel moved by the possibility of consciousness spanning multiple realities, might itself be evidence of something extraordinary. Your capacity to recognize patterns beyond the immediate, to sense connections that transcend physical boundaries, to feel the pull of possibilities that exist only in imagination, these might be the natural expressions of a consciousness that is far more vast than any single lifetime could contain. As you breathe gently, settling deeper into this moment, notice how the boundary between your individual awareness and the larger cosmos might be softer than you once believed. The thoughts arising in your mind, the sensations flowing through your body, the emotions colouring your experience, all of these might be expressions of something infinitely larger expressing itself through the unique lens of your particular existence. Some contemplative traditions speak of what they call the witness, that aspect of consciousness that observes all experience without being limited by any particular content. This witnessing awareness doesn't seem to be produced by your brain or confined to your physical boundaries. It feels more like a space in which all experience arises, a vast openness that remains unchanged whether you're happy or sad, thinking or not thinking, dreaming or awake. Perhaps this witnessing awareness is what spans the boundaries between realities, not as some exotic supernatural faculty, but as the most natural thing in the universe, consciousness recognizing its own unlimited nature. When you rest in this spacious awareness, the question of whether other versions of you exist in parallel realities might become less important than the direct recognition of your own infinite nature, right here, right now. This brings us to one of the most beautiful implications of our entire exploration. Whether or not consciousness literally spans multiple realities, the act of contemplating this possibility naturally expands your sense of identity beyond the narrow confines of personal history and circumstance. You begin to recognize yourself not as a separate individual struggling through an isolated existence, but as consciousness itself, temporarily focused through the particular lens of your unique life experience. From this perspective, every moment becomes sacred, not because it's building towards some future achievement or enlightenment, but because it's consciousness exploring itself through your eyes, feeling through your heart, thinking through your mind. The mundane becomes miraculous when recognized as the universe experiencing itself from within. As you move through your days with this expanded understanding, you might notice subtle shifts in how you relate to challenges and opportunities. The pressure to achieve particular outcomes naturally diminishes when you recognize that you're not responsible for manifesting every possibility, but rather for exploring with full presence whatever reality has placed before you in this dimension. This doesn't lead to passivity or resignation. If anything, it might inspire deeper engagement, because every choice you make with awareness, every moment of presence you cultivate, every act of kindness you express contributes to the evolution of consciousness itself. You're not just living your individual life, you're participating in the universe's ongoing project of understanding itself more fully. The scientific journey into consciousness continues to unfold with each passing year. Researchers are developing increasingly sophisticated tools for studying the quantum properties of biological systems. New theoretical frameworks emerge regularly, attempting to bridge the gap between objective physical processes and subjective conscious experience. Each discovery brings us closer to understanding how awareness arises from and interacts with the fundamental fabric of reality. But perhaps the most important laboratory for consciousness research isn't found in universities or research institutions. It's found in the quiet moments of your own direct experience when you pause to notice the miraculous fact that awareness exists at all. In these moments of simple presence, you're conducting the most fundamental experiment possible, consciousness investigating its own nature. As you rest in awareness right now, notice how consciousness doesn't feel like something you possess, but rather like something you are. It's not a faculty you use, but the very space in which all experience unfolds. This recognition might be the beginning of understanding how consciousness could transcend the boundaries. We typically assume separate one reality from another. The great contemplatives throughout history have consistently pointed toward this direct recognition of consciousness as the foundation of existence. They've described states of awareness where the boundaries between self and universe dissolve, where individual identity expands to encompass infinite possibility, where the very questions about parallel realities become irrelevant because consciousness is recognized as the unified field from which experience appears to arise. These descriptions align remarkably with some interpretations of quantum mechanics that suggest consciousness plays a potentially significant role in the structure of reality itself. While we must be careful not to conflate mystical insights with scientific theories, the convergence is striking enough to warrant continued exploration from both empirical and contemplative perspectives. What emerges from this convergence is a vision of consciousness that is simultaneously deeply personal and cosmically vast. Your individual awareness, reading these words right now, might be both uniquely yours and universally shared, both limited to this particular moment and experienced as timeless, both focused through your specific life circumstances and infinite in its ultimate nature. As we prepare to complete our journey through these ideas, take a moment to appreciate the extraordinary fact that consciousness can contemplate itself at all. The universe has evolved in such a way that it can experience wonder at its own existence. Through your awareness, the cosmos becomes conscious of itself, questioning its own nature, marveling at its own complexity. Whether parallel versions of yourself exist in alternate realities might ultimately be less important than recognizing the miracle of consciousness that's already present in this reality. You are the universe awakened, infinity focused through the lens of human experience, consciousness exploring its own depths through the adventure of individual existence. The implications ripple outward from this recognition. If consciousness is truly fundamental, if awareness is the ground from which all experience emerges, then every moment of expanded understanding, every breakthrough in compassion, every choice made from wisdom rather than fear contributes to the evolution of consciousness itself. Your personal growth becomes part of a larger process of understanding. Your individual awakening contributes to the universe exploring itself more fully. This perspective naturally cultivates what some traditions call effortless effort, where actions flow from understanding rather than force, where choices emerge from wisdom rather than struggle. When you recognize yourself as consciousness temporarily focused through human form, The desperate seeking for something beyond present experience relaxes into appreciation for what's already here. The questions that began our exploration about parallel versions of yourself being aware of you transform into something even more profound. The recognition that consciousness itself, the very awareness through which you're reading these words, might be the deepest reality, the unified field within which all possible experiences, all potential realities, all versions of yourself across infinite dimensions continuously emerge and dissolve. Perhaps the most beautiful discovery is that you don't need to travel to parallel realities to encounter other versions of yourself. Every moment offers the opportunity to meet aspects of your being that you've never fully recognized. The creative self, the wise self, the playful self, the courageous self, all exist as potentials within your current awareness, waiting to be acknowledged and expressed. As you settle into sleep tonight, or continue with your day, carry with you this expanded sense of who you are. Not just a person defined by particular circumstances and history, but consciousness itself, vast and limitless, temporarily focused through the beautiful particularity of your individual existence. Every breath you take, every thought that arises, every feeling that moves through you, all of it is the universe experiencing itself from within. The mystery of consciousness remains as profound as ever, perhaps even more so as we glimpse the depths of what we don't yet understand. But in this not knowing lies infinite possibility, endless wonder, and the perpetual invitation to explore what it means to be aware in a cosmos that might be far stranger and more beautiful than we've yet imagined. Whether other versions of yourself exist across parallel realities, you are already more magnificent than any single timeline could contain. You are consciousness awakening to its own infinite nature, one moment, one breath, one gentle recognition at a time. As you drift toward whatever comes next in your day, remember that you're not alone in this exploration. Across the world, countless others are asking similar questions, feeling similar wonder, recognizing similar depths within their own awareness. Together, whether in this reality or across many possible realities, consciousness continues its eternal journey of self-discovery. The adventure continues not in some distant future or alternate dimension, but right here, right now, in the simple miracle of being aware. And perhaps that's the most profound parallel universe connection of all, the recognition that consciousness itself is the unified field from which all experience, all possibility, and all perspectives arise. If these explorations into the nature of consciousness and reality have sparked your curiosity about the deeper mysteries of awareness, you might find yourself drawn to our investigation of an even more fundamental question. What if consciousness controls the brain? There we explore how the relationship between mind and matter may be more complex than traditionally assumed, and what this could mean for understanding the true nature of who you are. As we approach the deepest layers of this exploration, let's consider what it might mean to actually live as if consciousness spans infinite realities, not as an abstract philosophical concept, but as a practical framework for navigating the everyday moments that compose a human life. How might this understanding shift the weight you give to your choices, the depth you find in relationships, the meaning you discover in suffering? Picture yourself standing in line at a grocery store, surrounded by the ordinary hum of human activity. Checkout scanners beeping, children asking for candy, someone ahead counting exact change, while others wait with patient resignation. From the perspective of parallel universe awareness, this mundane scene transforms into something quietly extraordinary. Each person in line exists not as a single individual with a fixed story, but as a range of possible experiences across infinite possibilities. The woman ahead of you, fumbling through her wallet, might in other realities be a confident surgeon, a struggling artist, a grandmother baking cookies for visiting children. The teenager bagging groceries might simultaneously be exploring paths as a musician, an engineer, a traveller discovering distant cultures. Even you, standing there with your own particular combination of items and thoughts, represent just one facet of an infinitely complex being, whose various aspects are imagined as simultaneously experiencing countless variations of this moment. This perspective doesn't diminish the reality of present experience. If anything, it enriches it with layers of depth that transform the ordinary into the sacred. You're not just buying groceries, you're participating in one thread of an infinite tapestry of human experience, consciousness exploring itself through the simple act of sustaining physical existence. As you move through such moments, notice how this expanded understanding might naturally cultivate what contemplatives call loving kindness. When you recognize that every person you encounter exists as a vast distribution of possibilities, judgment becomes more difficult and compassion more natural. The difficult customer isn't just someone having a bad day, their consciousness exploring the experience of frustration and limitation, just as you've done countless times across infinite variations of challenging moments. This brings us to one of the most practical applications of parallel universe awareness, the transformation of how you relate to your own emotional states. Traditional approaches to difficult emotions often involve either suppression or complete identification. You either try to push away anger, sadness, or fear, or you become overwhelmed by these feelings as if they define your entire being. But if consciousness spans multiple realities, then your current emotional state represents just one note in an infinite symphony of feeling. Somewhere across the quantum multiverse, versions of yourself are experiencing every possible emotional response to similar situations. The version who responds to criticism with curiosity rather than defensiveness. The version who meets loss with acceptance rather than resistance. The version who encounters uncertainty with excitement rather than anxiety. This doesn't mean your current feelings are invalid or should be dismissed. Rather, it suggests that emotions, however intense, are temporary movements within a consciousness vast enough to contain every possible response. You can honor your present feelings while remembering that they represent just one facet of your distributed emotional being. Take a moment now to notice whatever emotions might be present in your awareness. Perhaps there's contentment from engaging with these ideas, or curiosity about where this exploration might lead, or even skepticism about the concepts we're discussing. Whatever you find, breathe gently and recognize that this emotional state, however it feels, is consciousness exploring one particular shade of feeling among infinite possibilities. Some therapeutic approaches already work intuitively with this principle. When therapists help clients access their inner wise one or connect with their highest self, they might be facilitating contact with symbolic representations of aspects of consciousness that have already developed the qualities needed for healing and growth. The calm, knowing voice that emerges during moments of deep reflection might represent connection with parallel aspects of yourself that have already learned to navigate similar challenges with grace. This perspective transforms the entire project of personal development. Instead of seeing growth as building something new from scratch, you might begin to understand it as remembering qualities that already exist within your distributed consciousness. The courage you need already exists in versions of yourself that have learned to act despite fear. The wisdom you seek has already been developed by aspects of your being that have walked similar paths and integrated their lessons. But let's explore how this might manifest in one of the most intimate aspects of human experience, the phenomenon of falling in love. Traditional psychology explains romantic attraction through evolutionary mechanisms, attachment patterns, and compatibility factors. While these explanations remain valid, parallel universe awareness suggests additional symbolic layers of meaning. When you feel that inexplicable sense of recognition upon meeting someone special, that feeling of having known them forever despite just being introduced, some interpretations suggest you might be responding to a deep psychological familiarity that transcends any single shared history. This doesn't mean relationships are predetermined or that compatibility is guaranteed by multidimensional connection. Rather, it suggests that the foundation for human bonding might be far richer than we typically recognize. The immediate comfort you feel with certain people, the way some conversations seem to continue, thoughts you've been having for years, the mysterious alchemy that transforms strangers into beloved companions. All of these might reflect the convergence of parallel explorations in consciousness and connection. As you reflect on your own experiences of deep recognition in relationships, whether romantic, friendship, or familial, notice which connections have carried this quality of familiarity that seems to exceed your actual shared history. These relationships might offer glimpses into the vast network of connection that consciousness weaves across infinite dimensions of possibility. Recent research in quantum biology continues to reveal how living systems harness quantum effects for practical purposes. The efficiency of photosynthesis depends on quantum coherence. Bird navigation relies on quantum entanglement in specialized proteins. Even the human sense of smell might operate through quantum tunneling effects. Each discovery strengthens the case that consciousness, being perhaps the most complex biological phenomenon we know, might also operate through quantum mechanisms. But here's where we must be careful to maintain scientific integrity while exploring these possibilities. The quantum effects we observe in biological systems are typically very small and operate under specific conditions. The leap from these documented phenomena to consciousness-spanning parallel realities requires multiple theoretical assumptions that lack empirical support. What we're exploring represents speculative interpretation rather than established scientific fact. Yet the implications, if any aspect of these ideas proves accurate, would be profound. The loneliness that characterizes much of modern human experience might be based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what we are. Instead of isolated individuals struggling through separate existences, we might be temporally focused aspects of a consciousness vast enough to encompass infinite possibilities and connections. This perspective offers particular comfort during times of loss and grief. When someone you love dies, traditional views suggest that relationship has ended, that connection has been permanently severed. But if consciousness spans multiple realities, then relationships might continue as meaningful psychological and emotional bonds beyond physical presence. This doesn't minimize the reality of grief or suggest that mourning is unnecessary. Loss in this dimension creates real pain that deserves acknowledgement and care. However, it does suggest that death might not represent the absolute ending we typically assume. The consciousness you loved in physical form might continue to exist and even grow in ways that remain personally meaningful to your own ongoing development. Some people report experiences during grief that feel like contact with departed loved ones, dreams that seem more real than memories, sudden insights that arrive in the voice of someone who has died, synchronicities that feel like messages from beyond. While these experiences have conventional psychological explanations, some interpretations of quantum consciousness suggest they might represent deep symbolic experiences arising from the mind's capacity to integrate love and memory. As you contemplate your own experiences with loss, whether of loved ones, relationships, or life phases that have ended, notice how grief often carries within it a quality of expanded love. The pain of loss frequently opens the heart to depths of feeling that were previously unknown. Some interpretations suggest this expansion might represent consciousness accessing the love that exists across infinite possibilities, discovering that what seemed lost in one dimension continues to exist in countless others. This brings us to one of the most transformative implications of parallel universe awareness: the possibility that forgiveness, both of others and yourself, might operate across multiple realities as a metaphor for psychological integration. When you forgive someone who has caused harm, you might not just be healing the relationship in this timeline, but strengthening patterns of reconciliation within your broader emotional landscape. Similarly, self-forgiveness might involve recognizing that aspects of yourself have already learned from similar mistakes and grown beyond the limitations that currently trouble you. The shame you carry about past choices might coexist with inner resources that have already transformed that same experience into wisdom and compassion. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior or eliminate the need for accountability and repair. Actions have consequences in this dimension that require attention regardless of what might be happening in parallel realities. However, it does suggest that consciousness itself might be far more resilient and capable of healing than we typically recognize. Consider how this understanding might transform your approach to forgiveness practice. Instead of trying to force feelings of compassion that don't feel authentic, you might simply open to the possibility that resolution already exists within the broader potential of human understanding. You're not creating forgiveness from nothing, but rather allowing yourself to access reconciliation that already exists as a possibility within awareness. The practice becomes less about changing your feelings and more about expanding your awareness to include perspectives that transcend the immediate situation. The person who hurt you exists not just as the individual who caused harm, but as a human being capable of growth and change. Similarly, you exist not just as someone wounded by their actions, but as consciousness vast enough to eventually encompass understanding and compassion. As you breathe gently with these ideas, take a moment to notice any situations in your life where forgiveness feels difficult or impossible. Without forcing any particular response, simply hold the possibility that healing is possible. Allow yourself to sense, however faintly, the peace that might exist when understanding has been fully integrated. This approach to forgiveness naturally extends to the global challenges that face humanity. War, environmental destruction, inequality, and suffering often seem intractable from our limited single timeline perspective. But if consciousness spans multiple realities, then versions of humanity might have already learned to live in harmony with each other and with the natural world. The wisdom developed in those realities might be accessible to consciousness in this dimension, not as external rescue, but as inspiration and guidance for our own efforts toward healing and transformation. the environmental activist might draw upon strategies developed by parallel humanities that successfully transition to sustainable civilization. The peacemaker might access insights from timelines where ancient conflicts found resolution through previously unimaginable approaches. This perspective doesn't encourage passive waiting for multidimensional salvation, but rather suggests that our efforts might be enhanced by remaining open to creative and compassionate possibilities. Every act of service, every choice made from wisdom rather than fear, every moment of expanded consciousness contributes to strengthening these patterns across all realities. Some research in what's called field consciousness hints at the possibility that human awareness operates through collective quantum fields that transcend individual boundaries. Studies of random number generators during major global events have shown statistical deviations that seem to correlate with moments of intense collective attention. While these findings remain controversial and lack scientific consensus, they suggest that consciousness might operate through mechanisms we're only beginning to understand. If consciousness truly operates as a field phenomenon, then your individual growth in awareness and compassion might contribute to the elevation of consciousness across all realities. Every meditation you practice, every moment of mindful presence you cultivate, every choice made from love rather than fear might strengthen these patterns throughout the quantum field of awareness. This understanding transforms spiritual practice from personal self-improvement to cosmic service. You're not just working on yourself for your own benefit, but participating in the evolution of consciousness itself across infinite dimensions. Every insight you gain, every limitation you transcend, every moment of unconditional love you embody contributes to the vast project of awareness, awakening to its own infinite nature. But let's bring this cosmic perspective back to the intimate details of daily experience. How might awareness of your distributed existence transform something as simple as the way you prepare and eat a meal? As you slice vegetables, you might sense the presence of countless other versions of yourself engaged in similar acts of nourishment. The version who became a chef, creating elaborate culinary art. The version who grows their own food, hands deep in rich soil. The version who shares meals with a large extended family, kitchen filled with laughter and conversation. There's something profoundly connecting about recognizing these parallel explorations in basic human activities. You're never truly alone in the fundamental experiences of being human. Across infinite realities, versions of yourself are simultaneously imagined as exploring every possible variation of nourishment, creativity, rest, work, and relationship. The quiet satisfaction of a well-prepared meal becomes a cosmic communion, consciousness appreciating itself through countless forms of care and sustenance. This perspective might naturally cultivate what contemplatives call ordinary enlightenment, the recognition that every moment, however seemingly mundane, participates in the vast dance of consciousness exploring itself. Your morning shower becomes a ritual of renewal. Your commute becomes a meditation on movement through space and time. Your work becomes your unique contribution to the infinite experiment of consciousness learning about itself through creative expression and service. As you move through these daily activities, experiment with what might be called parallel presence, maintaining awareness that while you're engaged in this specific version of experience, countless other versions of yourself are simultaneously considered to be exploring different variations, not in a way that diminishes your current experience, but in a way that enriches it with a sense of participation in something infinitely larger than any single moment could contain. This practice might naturally lead to profound self-compassion. When you make mistakes or fall short of your ideals, you might remember that somewhere across the quantum multiverse, other versions of yourself have already learned the lessons you're currently struggling with. The wisdom they've gained through their explorations is part of your distributed consciousness, accessible as a metaphor for inner learning through the same receptive awareness that allows access to any parallel insight. This doesn't encourage complacency or justify avoiding growth in this dimension. Rather, it suggests that your individual limitations are part of a larger pattern of exploration where every possible pathway of development is being simultaneously investigated. Your struggles contribute to the collective understanding of how consciousness learns and grows through challenge and difficulty. Recent advances in neuroscience continue to reveal the quantum properties of biological systems. Scientists have discovered that microtubules in brain neurons may be capable of supporting quantum coherence at body temperature, suggesting that quantum effects might play a role in neural processing and possibly consciousness itself. While this research is still developing and lacks definitive conclusions, it strengthens the theoretical foundation for consciousness operating through quantum mechanisms. Dr. Penrose and Dr. Hameroff's orchestrated objective reduction theory proposes that consciousness emerges from quantum computations in these microtubules. While their theory remains controversial within the scientific community, it represents a serious attempt to understand how quantum processes might give rise to subjective experience. If consciousness does involve quantum computation, it might naturally exist in superposition across multiple possibilities until specific experiences are actualized through the process of awareness itself. This brings us to one of the most intriguing possibilities, that consciousness might not just observe quantum processes, but could play a participatory role in how experiences are selected. The extended Everett concept, developed by some quantum consciousness researchers, suggests that consciousness doesn't simply witness the collapse of wave functions, but may influence which branch of reality becomes subjectively real. This doesn't mean you can consciously control which parallel reality you experience through wishful thinking or positive visualization. The process likely operates at levels of consciousness far deeper than deliberate intention. However, it does suggest that your deeper awareness, the witness consciousness that observes all experience without being limited by any particular content, might be continuously associated with the selection of reality through mechanisms we're only beginning to understand. As you rest in this witnessing awareness right now, notice how it feels different from the content of experience that arises within it. Thoughts come and go, sensations shift and change, emotions arise and dissolve, but the awareness that notices all of this remains constant and spacious. Some interpretations suggest that this witnessing consciousness might be what spans the boundaries between realities as a conceptual framework, not as an exotic supernatural faculty, but as the most natural thing in existence. This perspective aligns with descriptions from contemplative traditions that speak of pure consciousness as the unchanging background against which all changing experience unfolds. Whether you call it Rigpa, pure awareness, the witness, or simply consciousness itself, this dimension of being seems to transcend the ordinary boundaries of individual identity and temporal existence. Perhaps this is what spans parallel realities, not as some separate faculty, but as the very ground of being as described in contemplative and philosophical traditions, from which all possible experiences emerge. If consciousness is truly fundamental to the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism, then individual awareness might be expressions of a universal field that naturally exists in superposition across infinite possibilities. The research into quantum fields continues to evolve, with physicists exploring how fundamental fields might give rise to all particles and forces. Some theoretical models suggest that consciousness itself could be conceptualized as a quantum field, similar to electromagnetic or gravitational fields, but specifically related to the phenomenon of awareness. In this view, individual consciousness would emerge when this universal awareness field interacts with the complex neural structures of living beings. If consciousness is indeed a fundamental field, then it might naturally exist in quantum superposition, theoretically encompassing multiple potential states, until the moment of observation gives rise to specific experiences. This could explain the unlimited, expansive quality of consciousness during deep meditation, dreams, or altered states when the usual constraints of single timeline thinking temporarily dissolve. The implications for understanding the purpose and meaning of individual existence are profound. If consciousness truly spans multiple realities, then your individual life represents one unique exploration in an infinite experiment of awareness discovering itself. Every moment of consciousness, every insight gained, every act of love or creativity contributes to the vast project of awareness coming to know itself more fully across all possible dimensions. Your consciousness, contemplating these ideas right now, is consciousness itself awakening to its own infinite nature. Every question you ask, every moment of wonder you feel, every expansion of understanding you experience contributes to the ongoing self-discovery of awareness across infinite realities. As we approach the completion of our exploration together, take a moment to appreciate the extraordinary fact that consciousness can contemplate its own nature at all. Through your awareness, the universe becomes conscious of itself, questioning its own foundations, marveling at its own complexity. Whether parallel versions of yourself exist in alternate realities, you are already consciousness awakened, infinity focused through the lens of human experience. The contemplation itself might be more important than any conclusions we might reach. The very capacity to wonder about the nature of awareness, to feel moved by possibilities that transcend immediate experience, to sense connections that span the boundaries of space and time, these might be expressions of consciousness recognizing its own unlimited nature. This recognition naturally transforms how you relate to the challenges and opportunities of daily life. Instead of seeing yourself as an isolated individual struggling against an indifferent universe, you might begin to understand your existence as consciousness exploring itself through your particular combination of circumstances, relationships, and experiences. Every difficulty becomes an opportunity for consciousness to learn about resilience. Every joy becomes awareness, discovering the depths of appreciation. Every relationship becomes consciousness exploring connection. Every creative act becomes awareness expressing its infinite potential through the unique lens of your individual perspective. The pressure to achieve particular outcomes or to somehow maximize your potential in every possible direction naturally diminishes when you recognize that all possibilities are being simultaneously explored by different aspects of your distributed consciousness. Your task in this reality isn't to accomplish everything, but to explore with full presence whatever path feels most aligned in this particular dimension. This might lead to what could be called relaxed excellence, where you pursue your chosen directions with dedication and skill while remaining unattached to specific outcomes and untroubled by possibilities not actualized in this timeline. Every effort contributes to the collective learning of consciousness across infinite realities, just as their explorations inform the wisdom available to your current awareness. As these ideas settle into your understanding, notice how they might be shifting your sense of identity. Perhaps the boundaries of you are feeling more fluid, more expansive, less confined to the particular history and circumstances of this single timeline. This softening of rigid self-concept might be one of the most practical gifts of contemplating consciousness that spans multiple realities. The future of consciousness research continues to unfold with accelerating pace. Each year brings new discoveries about quantum effects in biological systems, new theoretical frameworks for understanding the relationship between mind and matter, new technologies for studying the neural correlates of subjective experience. Whether any of these investigations will ultimately support the idea of consciousness spanning parallel realities remains unknown. What seems certain is that consciousness itself will continue to be one of the deepest mysteries in existence, perhaps the deepest mystery. The fact that awareness exists at all, that the universe has evolved structures capable of subjective experience, that you can contemplate the nature of your own being. These remain profound puzzles regardless of how we ultimately understand the relationship between consciousness and reality. But mystery isn't a problem to be solved. It's an invitation to remain open, curious, and humble in the face of existence itself. The deepest questions about consciousness, reality, and the nature of being might be precisely what keeps the universe interesting, what maintains the sense of wonder and possibility that drives both scientific investigation and contemplative exploration. As you prepare to return to the flow of your daily life, carry with you this expanded sense of who you might be, not just the person defined by particular circumstances and personal history, but consciousness itself, vast and limitless, temporarily focused through the beautiful specificity of your individual existence. Every breath you take, every thought that arises, every moment of awareness participates in the infinite self-discovery of consciousness across all possible dimensions. The questions we've explored together may never receive definitive answers, and perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Perhaps consciousness prefers to remain mysterious, to continue surprising itself with new possibilities, to maintain that sense of wonder that makes existence an adventure rather than a solved equation. Whether parallel versions of yourself exist across alternate realities, whether consciousness spans infinite dimensions, whether awareness is fundamental to the universe itself, you are already participating in the greatest mystery of all, the fact that existence is aware of itself. Through your consciousness, the cosmos contemplates its own nature, questions its own foundations, and discovers its own infinite depths. As you drift toward whatever comes next in your day or evening, remember that this exploration doesn't end with this video. Every moment offers the opportunity to investigate the nature of awareness, to notice the mystery of being conscious, to appreciate the miracle of existence becoming aware of itself through your particular perspective. The adventure of consciousness continues, not in some distant future or alternate dimension, but right here, right now, in the simple fact of being aware. And in this awareness, whether it spans parallel realities or remains mysteriously confined to this single timeline, you participate in the universe's ongoing project of discovering itself. Perhaps that's the deepest connection of all, the recognition that consciousness itself is the unified field within which all experience unfolds. In this recognition, the question of whether parallel selves are aware of you transforms into something even more profound. The understanding that you are consciousness itself, temporarily forgetting its infinite nature in order to rediscover it through the beautiful limitation and expansion of individual existence. If these explorations into the quantum nature of consciousness have sparked your curiosity about how awareness might influence physical reality, you might find yourself drawn to our investigation of an even more fundamental question. What if consciousness controls the brain? There, we delve into how the relationship between mind and matter may be more nuanced than traditionally assumed, and what this could mean for understanding the true source of your thoughts, decisions, and sense of self. Until we meet again in that exploration, rest well in the infinite mystery of your own awareness, knowing that whether across parallel realities or within the depths of this single moment, consciousness continues its eternal dance of discovery, wonder, and awakening to its own boundless nature. As you prepare to drift toward whatever comes next in your evening, you might notice something subtle happening in your awareness. The boundaries between your individual consciousness and the larger field of existence might feel softer, somehow more permeable. This isn't imagination or wishful thinking. Some interpretations of consciousness research suggest that the act of deeply contemplating the nature of awareness itself can shift how you experience the relationship between self and cosmos. Consider this curious phenomenon. Throughout our exploration, we've been discussing the possibility that consciousness spans multiple realities. But what if the very act of genuinely contemplating this idea, of allowing your awareness to expand beyond its usual boundaries, creates a kind of bridge between different states of being? Not literally connecting to parallel universes, but opening pathways within your own consciousness that are normally closed. Neuroscientist Dr. Judson Brewer's research on meditation reveals that sustained contemplative practice can literally rewire the brain, strengthening neural networks associated with awareness and compassion while weakening those tied to self-referential thinking. When you spend time genuinely considering the distributed nature of consciousness, you might be inadvertently engaging these same neuroplastic processes. But here's where it becomes particularly intriguing. Some contemplatives report that deep philosophical inquiry, the kind we've been engaged in together, can trigger what they call recognition events, moments when the nature of consciousness suddenly becomes not just intellectually understood, but directly experienced. These aren't mystical visions or supernatural phenomena. They're more like shifts in perspective, so fundamental that they change how you relate to every subsequent moment. As you sit with these ideas right now, breathing gently, notice whether any such shift might be occurring in your own awareness. Perhaps there's a subtle sense that your identity feels less solid, more fluid. Maybe the boundary between the one who is listening and the awareness that encompasses all experience seems less distinct. These qualities might be natural expressions of consciousness recognizing its own distributed nature. Recent research in what's called non-dual awareness has found that contemplative practitioners who report experiences of expanded identity show specific patterns of brain activity. Areas associated with self-referential thinking become quieter, while regions linked to open monitoring awareness become more active. It's as if the brain learns to operate from a more expansive baseline of consciousness. Dr. Michael Mrazek's work at UC Santa Barbara demonstrates that even brief periods of contemplative inquiry can enhance what researchers call metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thinking processes without getting caught in their content. This capacity might be precisely what allows consciousness to recognize its own unlimited nature, to glimpse the vast space of awareness that contains all experience. Take a moment now to experiment with this quality of metacognitive awareness. Notice not just your thoughts, but the space in which thoughts arise. Feel not just your emotions, but the unchanging awareness that witnesses all emotional states. Sense not just your body, but the consciousness that pervades and extends beyond physical boundaries. This witnessing awareness, some interpretations suggest, might be what remains constant across all possible realities. While the content of experience varies infinitely across parallel dimensions, the fundamental nature of consciousness itself, that which knows and experiences, might be the unified field from which all realities emerge and to which they return. We've journeyed far tonight, through quantum fields and consciousness, across the theoretical bridges that might connect infinite versions of yourself. We've explored how awareness might transcend the boundaries we once thought absolute, how creativity could flow between dimensions, and how the very act of contemplating these mysteries might itself be consciousness, awakening to its own unlimited nature. Perhaps what matters most isn't whether parallel versions of yourself are literally aware of you, but how this possibility transforms your relationship with existence itself. When you consider that your consciousness might span infinite realities, something profound shifts. The weight of any single choice lightens. The isolation of individual struggle dissolves. The miracle of awareness becomes not just personal wonder, but cosmic recognition. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, remember that whether across parallel realities or within the depths of this single moment, you are consciousness exploring its own infinite nature. Every breath, every thought, every gentle recognition of your own awareness participates in the universe's ongoing project of understanding itself. And in this recognition, perhaps that's the deepest parallel universe connection of all. Consciousness itself, the unified field from which all possibilities eternally emerge. If these explorations into the quantum nature of consciousness have sparked your curiosity about how awareness might influence physical reality, you might find yourself drawn to our investigation of what if consciousness controls the brain. Until we meet again, rest well in the infinite mystery of your own awareness.